Hello and welcome to the Kelcast, the Hearthstone Arena podcast where we try to get better without cursing. I'm Keladar, a longtime Infinite Arena leaderboard player and streamer on Twitch. Joining me as my co-host is another Arena leaderboard player, Kellen Abel.
Hey, I'm Kellen Abel. Glad to be one of the Kells.
If you want to find us on social media, you can search for Keladar, that's Keludar, on Twitch, YouTube, or Twitter. Kellen, what are we looking at this week?
This week on episode 2 of the Kelcast, we're covering the top 5 arena classes. We're going to use the hsreplay statistics to determine those classes, but our personal opinions might be slightly different. We just thought it'd be easier to use the top 5 percentage-wise so that everybody's on the same page.
All right, and with that, let's get on with the show. So the top 5 arena classes. Go ahead, Kellen.
Well, we wanted to, before we got into the actual details of each individual class, we thought we'd discuss what's going on in this meta and why specific classes might be winning. One of the things that we talk about a lot, actually, Kel and I talk frequently on the phone about what we think is working and what's not. And we think that right now, what we've seen is that the meta is an early-late meta. So this is one of those metas that's a little different than others. Most metas tend to be either control or aggro or curve. But right now, we're in a situation where the early game cards are really good, and also the late game cards are really good. The cards that are really lacking in quality are the 4 and 5 drops. So we've decided to call it an early late meta. Some of the things we're talking about, actually, Kel, why don't you go over some of the reasons why that's going on?
Yeah, I think that it's interesting. I'm finding that at first, I struggled with the beginning of the meta when Scholomance came out, and there's definitely actually some similarities between the meta before the rotation and after.
Oh, wait, Scholomance or Dark Moon?
Oh, I meant Dark Moon. You're right.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay. I just want to make sure.
Yeah, no, you're correct. You're right. You're right. Dark Moon.
Honestly, it could go back that far. So, but
no,
sure,
yeah.
Dark Moon.
So one thing that I'm noticing is that, like, you can win the early game, right? And unless your deck is really aggressive and your opponent has literally nothing, it just doesn't usually work to rush people down. You can definitely set up enough damage early on to help you set up a late game win condition. But I'm realizing that, with Rush and with a lot of the cards in the meta, like you definitely need to figure out, most of the time it's going to be, how am I winning late in the games? And, again, the early damage can matter to kind of set up maybe some Proto Drakes that go face or something. But generally, you need to, you can't assume that you're going to hold the board the whole game. And you just have to kind of be able to figure out, how am I going to survive the swings without completely losing the board so much that I end up just being off the board and having no chance of winning.
Some of the classes that Kel and I have talked, or some of the cards, that we've talked about as linchpins of this format that cause this kind of situation are things like Imprisoned Vile Fiend, which will come up frequently later in the pod. But Imprisoned Vile Fiend is a card that really dominates the early game. It's a 2-mana 3/5 in all, for all intents and purposes, but it sets you up in a situation where you can create a board while your opponent can't mess with it, and then you can use that board immediately to dominate your opponent's board. So the early game is dominated by cards like Vile Fiend. It's a 2-mana 2/3 world. Like, we've got Parade Leaders and River Crocs running everywhere. So you're going to be able to kill something almost always with Vile Fiend, and if not, Vile Fiend can usually work in tandem with something like Fireplume Phoenix or an Og Merchant to finish off your opponent's early game board. The problem is, once you get to the late game, the Vile Fiend doesn't really do anything anymore. So you need to have cards in your deck that cost 6, 7, 8, and 9 that can actually affect the board. I think the most obvious example that people point to is Proto Drake. Plague Proto Drake is probably the, so a lot of people think it's format defining. A lot of people think it's the most important card in the meta right now. Although its win rates don't reflect that, it does certainly epitomize what we're talking about here. These late game cards that have the ability to vastly outperform their mana cost. So Proto Drake is a great example because it's only an 8-mana card, makes an 8/8. In the past, that's kind of what we expect, an 8-mana 8/8. But right now, Proto Drake is a card that's an 8-mana 8/8 and at worst makes a 4/4. So it's an 8-mana 12/12, and that's your bad situation. So what kind of things are important to stop your opponent from setting up this kind of situation where they have a Vile Fiend, they win the board, and then they have a Proto Drake later?
Yeah, I mean, you have to be able to have like solid minions that, can go back. You need things like Fishy Flyers. Like those are the other cards that are really important. Cards like Fishy Flyer that, trade back in and like make you not lose the board again. Especially also Raider is another great one because it just not only does it remove something that maybe the board's kind of messy and you kind of need to, they might have like a 3-1 on the board and something else that's kind of bigger. You play that and all of a sudden you set up a situation where you kill what they have and you also have, a minion that kills the other thing on their board, so you can get some 2-for-1s. 2-for-1s are really important right now, like more so than even normal. And interestingly, not to get too off track, but I remembered, Kellen, the other thing that we talked about that we didn't put in the notes, which was the combo thing. We were talking about combos. Yeah. So unlike, we couldn't figure it out before we started the show what we talked about, but it's the combo card. So like, I'll be the first to admit that I'm very much a consistent player. I like to draft. I'm one of those people that I might not get as many 12s as some people, but I get tons of like 7 to 10s and a lot of consistent results. I very rarely go under 4 or 5 wins. But even for a player like me, like the truth is you cannot win without your combos. We talked about Demon Hunter, how Parade Leader is really good. And like you want, even like Broom is good in that class because you can combo the Broom with the Parade Leader. Like little tiny synergies like that really matter. Where in the past, honestly, you would get punished for like not basically drafting those combinations and then not being able to play them. Now that games are going long enough where there's enough turns where you draw into things and you can even hold cards knowing like, well, I've got this Onyx and I can't win this game unless it triggers with a spell. So like, even though it's awkward for the board, I'm going to hold off on it, and it pays off normally.
I think part of the reason that works is because there are specifically those 3 cards in the format right now that give you cards in hand to play. So Sneaky Delinquent, Fishy Flyer, and Smug Senior are 3 Death Rattle minions that give you an additional copy of the card in your hand after they die. Right. So that gives you something to do and allows you to hold on to cards that could be used for synergy or combos later on.
That's a good point.
You're forced to play those. Typically, you're forced to play your synergy cards before they can get their full value. But because the meta includes a lot of neutral minions that allow you to double up on your mana, you're given curve cards or things to fill the slots where you would normally have to play those synergy cards.
Yeah, and I think like for a newer player that's listening to this, I would say that if you're struggling a lot, my best advice I can give you that's simple, that kind of like sums up what we're saying, is try to get consistent early game from 1 mana to 3 mana. Make sure you're taking good 3 mana cards. You might be giving up some good cards to take like Orcs or 3 mana 3/4s. So make sure your early game's consistent. Don't worry so much about hitting 4 and 5, but also make sure that you're getting basically. Usually we would say bombs or chonkers are like turn 7 to 10, but in this meta, because there's so many good 6s like Stalker and Smug, we've kind of expanded it to 6 mana. So make sure that you're getting the early consistent game and you're also getting the good late game. And also maybe consider trying to not play so tempo-ish and so like impatiently. It's hard to do. It's a really tough balance right now because you can't completely just give up things because then you'll start, you can fall really far behind. But it's a tough balance. But if you're struggling, I recommend trying. In almost every class, it works. The only one that I feel like it's not really as consistent is maybe Shaman. Where I don't go.
And maybe Druid,
we'll talk about that, but I think that pretty much covers everything. Wouldn't you say, Colin? We can probably move on to
it. Gives us a framework within which to view each individual class. So with that, I wanted to ask you about one of the classes people are really happy about right now, and that's Priest. Can you tell me what's going on with Priest and why does it fit so well into the meta we have right around us?
So funny enough, we were co-oping a Priest deck before this that I've been kind of texting Kellen about over and over because I'm shocked that it's doing quite so well. I'm not going to give you guys the whole deck list, but it's got pretty good early game. I've got like tour guides and some stuff, but what amazed me about it was it's not the prototypical Priest deck with like lots of renews and mind controls. It doesn't have a lot of that stuff, but what makes it work, even though to me it feels a little wonky, is that what I'm starting to realize after this is that what it does have is it has a lot of these neutral cards that are Priest-like. So one of the reasons I think Priest is doing so well is even if you don't get the powerful Priest cards, a lot of the neutral cards like Claw Machine, Fishy Flyer, they all play into the win condition. Because most Priest decks, generally the idea is get the game to turn 10, whether you have mind control or not. Like this deck doesn't even have one, and get to turn 10, slow the game down, and then take over. And that's normally now you can win Priest other ways, but a lot of times that's the way you win. So what's amazing is all the cards that are neutral are helping Priest to get to that point without even needing the, like I said, powerful cards. So I'm just finding that like I said, the neutral cards are really helping push. Smug is amazing as well. All of them really, they all are Priest-like cards. So because mostly because Rush is so prevalent, they've really been pushing Rush the last few expansions since it came out. So
speaking of Rush, Priest is a class that that struggles with initiative. It has a lot of good, solid, big minions. It has a lot of ability to heal those minions and keep them alive. But its weakness has always been cards that develop onto the board immediately. So something like Holy Fire ended up being a good card in the past when it was in the classic set or basic. I don't remember. But in any case, it was something that mattered in Priest because it gave you initiative. And right now, Priest has access to that kind of stuff through the ability to draft neutral minions like Claw Machine or Carnival Clown. Carnival Clown has half initiative because of taunt, but still, between Claw Machine, Vile Fiend, and Primordial Drake right now, it has multiple ways, many, many ways of putting something on the board that either your opponent has to deal with immediately or deals with their things immediately.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, really, like in the past, the way you lost his Priest is getting rushed down and not having time to develop your win condition. But like like Kellen was saying, Carnival Clown, Claw Machine, Vile Fiend, Prime Drake, all these cards. We actually looked up the top 10 win rates. And I'll read some of them off. We got Skeletal Dragon, Draconic Studies, Hysteria, Carnival Clown, Claw Machine, Vile Fiend, Prime Drake, the Setha, Veil Weaver, and Initiation. And they all do what we're talking about, which is they get stuff on the board, but they also deal with the board at the same time. So you're not having to like develop just bland minions and then they just hit your face because they know that you can't deal with it. You're actually dealing with their minions and you're developing. So it's really powerful.
I think Skeletal Dragon is the number one Priest card that is not a legendary card, and I think that's really, really descriptive of the class because Skeletal Dragon has that little bit of initiative by including taunt, but it also allows you to continue doing Priest stuff like draw cards, and so it doesn't delay your ability to continue priesting, but it also affects the board so drastically that your opponent is forced to deal with it. I think that's really, really a great example of cards that are fantastic in Priest right now.
Yeah. Well, I think that pretty much covers Priest. Why don't we move on to Shaman, and I'll let you tell them why you think Shaman's working at the moment, Kellen.
So Shaman is an interesting class right now because it does two things very well. It clears the board very well, and it develops onto the board very well. But I think the biggest strength of Shaman right now is that its board clears are one-sided. And you might say, wait, whoa, what about Tidal Wave? Tidal Wave is a two-sided board clear. Shaman's not able to, win the game by control or by a tempo because it has this amazing control card in Tidal Wave. Tidal Wave is not even in the top 10 Shaman Win Rate cards. It's a decent card because it has such a big swing potential, but it's beaten out by cards like Mekaru. It's not nearly as far up as you think because Shaman is actually one of the only tempo classes left in the format.
It's actually true. Yeah.
Isn't that crazy? But there's a few reasons why. I think the number one reason why is because it has Whack-A-Null Hammer. And Whack-A-Null Hammer is a card that is readily available. Not always, it's not super easy to draft, but you probably average like 0.75 Whack-A-Null Hammers per draft, something like that.
Yeah.
And you never pass it, but it's a card that not only deals with your opponent's board, but develops your board by an additional +1/+1. So Whack-A-Null Hammer is actually the third highest win rate non-legendary card in Shaman in Arena. And I think that's what's so important right now. And cards that go along with Whack-A-Null Hammer are the kind of cards that Shaman wants. So Mekaru is the fourth best card in Shaman that's not a legendary. And guess what? That combines incredibly well with Whack-A-Null Hammer. It's a card that not only develops your board, allows you to trade, and then still have a minion left over to get buffed by Whack-A-Null Hammer, or in the worst case scenario, Totemic Reflection, or anything like that. But I wanted to go over the top 7 or 8 cards of Shaman real quick and talk about why they're so important to the class identity. So number 1 is actually Gentle Megasaur, which we'll get into in a second. But second is Sea Giant, another card you wouldn't expect up there. Then it's Whack-A-Mole Hammer, then Mecharoo, then Carnival Clown. This one's weird in number 6. It's Augmented Elec, and then Maelstrom Portal, Dunk Tank, Molten Blast. So we have 3 one-sided board clears. We have, let's see, 1, 2, 3 payoffs for having a board, and 2 board creators. That paints a pretty clear picture for me. It tells me that Shaman wants to develop a board that is hard to deal with through Whack-A-Mole Hammer and Mecharoo and Gentle Megasaur, and it wants to then clear your opponent's board with cards like Maelstrom Portal, Dunk Tank, and Molten Blast. So you're really, with Shaman, just building up the best tempo situation you can, and then capitalizing on weaknesses your opponent has or valuable trades that you could make by clearing their smaller minions afterwards. The reason Sea Giant's so far up there is because Shaman is actually incredible at doing this right now. Maelstrom Portal, I think, is probably the best example of a card that does that. Maybe Mecharoo, but I think I'm going to go with the actual Shaman class card here. But Maelstrom Portal clears your opponent's board or deals that 1 extra ping and then gives you a minion afterwards, very much like an Aug Merchant or an Elven Archer or a Pen Flinger. All cards that are relevant and prevalent in this format. So I think Shaman is really good at clearing your opponent's board and then capitalizing on having a board yourself. And that's the biggest strength you can have in this format as a tempo class, because it allows you to save your hexes, your dunk tanks, and your molten blasts for your opponent's larger boards once they actually have a swing. It's rare they will.
Yeah, you don't have to tempo out the hex on, like, a 5/4. You can actually save it for the Smug, actually save it for the Proto Drake or the Colossus.
Exactly. You're allowed to save your Earth Shocks and your other big important spells. Earth Shock's a big spell, I guess, but it works in this context. But you're actually winning the game through just having solid 1, 2, and 3 mana minions. Augmented Elec, for example, that card should never be that high, according to my understanding of how it works. But just being a 3 mana 3/4 right now is a really good stat line when you're trying to deal with your opponent's board and create your own.
And I actually think one thing I wanted to mention about Shaman that I found is, I think this is true with a lot of classes, but the access to, I just thought of this as you were talking, but the access to spell power right now is really important. Like Maelstrom Portal, because you can use, the Aug Merchants and you have like so much spell power potential, there's a lot of cards that are really good without it, but with 1 spell power become really insane. Yeah. And it's like Dunk Tank's a great example. Maelstrom, they all that 1 extra, spell power, and people, you just draft it naturally. You don't even have to give up cards to get it. So I think that's also, it's making their board clears that much more powerful, where they can really deal with boards way more efficiently than maybe in other metas.
Okay, so I think we've covered Shaman. There's probably some more details. Actually, guys, if you have anything you want to mention or bring up, add it to a review or comment on our podcast, and we will definitely respond. We want to get feedback. So if you have a different idea of how Shaman works or think we made a mistake here, I'm pretty sure we didn't, because we're very, very good. But if you do, just comment or let us know. So moving on, though, I'm ready for some Druid talk, because I played Druid
I love
once.
me Druid.
Yeah, tell me why it's so good, because it is the 2nd or 3rd rated class, depending on the day you look at hsreplay.
Yeah, so I've had this discussion recently where many people say Rogue is the toughest class to play. I think Druid's actually way tougher, and the only reason is because Rogue's hero power is so strong, and naturally, Druids, a lot of my best Druids, you are hero powering within the first 3 or 4 turns, but you have to do it in a way where you continue to build a board and not lose a board. And that like, it's a really nice edge of when you can get away with the hero power, when you cannot. Things
hold
like,
on. Is that why Firefly is so good in this class? Because you need to sneak in extra.
Pings are super important, and there's actually a lot of pings in the meta as well, which also, you end up being 1 damage short a lot in Druid, because you have good minions, but sometimes, and unfortunately with all the rush, it can make it kind of difficult. But but right now, I mean, they got Arbor up, which is arguably one of the strongest cards ever made. It's a 5 mana, and if you don't have any minions on board, you get 2 4/3s for 5 mana, which isn't even really bad. And then if you have a board, you get a +2/+1 on all those minions. It's insane. So Arbor Up is just insane. You can discover it through, multiple ways. they have Marsh Hydra, Sea Giant. They have a lot of cards in the meta that help them with things they struggle with. They struggle with hard removal. Things like Derailed Coaster are really good because you typically have a lot of minions. You get a swing on turn 5. You also have buffs that can go with the Derailed Coaster. You can, power the wild or whatever. They got Dreaming Drake, which is an insanely powerful, becomes a 3-mana 5/6.
So I haven't played a lot of Druid. Can you remind me what Dreaming Drake does?
It's I want to make sure I get it's a 3-mana 3/4, I believe. And then it basically, when you corrupt it, becomes a 5/6. It gets +2/+2.
Oh, so it's a 3-mana 5/6.
Yeah, whenever it gets corrupted, yeah.
Okay, now that makes sense why it's so high up there.
It's funny because like the what's it called? Demon Hunter had that one that did kind of a similar thing with a lifesteal and stuff, but this one has a better buff. I think it's actually better. But yeah, the one thing about Druid right now is there's a lot of good early cards like Firefly, Mekaru. Those cards, those are the kind of cards that give Druid that early advantage where you can draft like a Savage Roar and just get enough of a. But that's Savage Roar is so important in Druid. I don't care if it's control, if it's fast, and I take at least one in every deck, and you get a little bit of early damage off, and then you get to turn 5 or 6, and you have 3 minions on the board, and sometimes that's all you need to push a lethal. So, and a lot of things that Druid struggles with, the meta solves that problem. Fishy Flyer, Claw Machine, like rush minions. They basically take over for the one weakness that Druid has. Which means that all their other strengths become a lot better because now they don't have to worry about this other thing that normally would hold them back.
I was going to say, in the past, we've had to use Starfire as our Druid clear card. We've had to use Naturalize, which doesn't even exist anymore. That was a great card, right?
Yeah, not to get too off subject, but I just watched one of our oldest. Just for fun, I watched an old clip of us from our first The Kel and Kel show, and we talked about Naturalize, and I fought for that card, and it was just funny because I talked about how the card doesn't matter because you want this mana tempo thing. It's just funny hearing Naturalize again. Yeah.
Speaking of that, that's what the rush minions do in Druid right now. They allow you to clear out these taunt minions that you actually have no way of dealing with because Keeper of the Grove, since it got nerfed to a 2/2 many, many years ago, just doesn't fit your curve anymore. So you have you really have no hard removal. So I think the rush minions like Claw Machine, Derailed Coaster, et cetera, we've talked about them a lot here. They help you get through these taunts that stop your aggressive tempo-based board plan.
And actually something you brought up, which is also true, where normally you might have, for instance, Swipe is a lot of times when you're winning with Druid, your cards like Starfire and Swipe are used to hit the face because it's the last little bit of reach. But because you don't have to utilize those things earlier on, you can save them for the face, and that gives them a big advantage. Because a lot of times in the past, you'd kind of have to use your Swipe tempo-wise on turn 4 against a Paladin or something just because you didn't have something to play or you couldn't do anything effective enough to keep the board moving. So you really couldn't save those type of cards. And like I told you with Shaman, we got Spell Power going on, and Spell Power is really good with Druid spells. So yeah, it's in a solid place. The win rate is a little under 50 the last I looked, but usually, like I said, Druid's win rate is almost always lower than it really, in terms of what its real power level is. So whenever I see Druid hovering around 50, I know it's strong. And if it's at the top of the meta, then it's really good.
Oh, Druid, right. So as of this exact moment, Druid is at 50.7% win rate for all tracked hsreplay decks. So that's a pretty good sign that Druid is a top class right now. That's
what I mean. Like it usually you can add 2 or 3% pretty much just by looking at it normally. All right, so let's move on to the next one. We're gonna have Kellen talk about Paladin, which they got basically the strongest cards. Ungoro was one of the strongest Paladin metas we've ever seen. So like anytime you have a class that has that strong of an impact on a meta, that when that set returns, it's going to have at least a pretty big impact. So go ahead.
Yeah, I remember when Ungoro came out and we were looking at Spikeridge Steed and Vine Cleaver, and we were just thinking, how are we ever going to get past the Paladin after turn 7? There's no way. They have too much value generation just off their random class cards that aren't even epics. Like, what are we supposed to do here? So I think so I'm just going to go, before we get started on Paladin, I want to list the top cards from the class, or the top win rate cards. And that's Underlight, non-legendaries, of course, but Underlight Ankling Rod, Hammer of the Narrow, Blessing of Authority, First Day of School, Vine Cleaver, Goody Two Shields, Christology, and Hand of Adal. So I think what that's talking about right here is exactly what we talked about when we mentioned what's good in the meta. There's cards that are good in the early game. First Day of School is one of the best. In fact, I had an opponent right before we co-op today, cast First Day of School for the 1-mana 2/5 dormant priest minion and the Babbling Book, the 1-mana 1/1 that did battle cries to generate a random mage.
There's some really scary things that can happen with that card with 2/1 drops.
There's some messed up results from First Day of School. And then it also includes cards like Vine Cleaver and sorry, what's the other one that I was thinking? Oh, Blessing of Authority, that are good later in the game. So you're starting with that early game power level in Christology and First Day of School, and that late game power level with Vine Cleaver and cards like that. Paladin also has the best way of taking advantage of early game minions in its power, in its ability to cast cards like Hand of Adal, Blessing of Kings, and Blessing of Authority, another card that kind of doubles up. It's a great late game card, and it's a good tempo early game card. So I think that's what's so powerful about Paladin. Not only are its early game cards probably the best in the format, it also has Lost in the Jungle, so you're just never short for 1-mana powerful plays. But also, it has the ability to play those late game powerhouses. There's Light of Hope. There's just a million. Libram of Justice. There's so many powerful late game plays in Paladin right now. But here's where I think Paladin actually takes over on other classes and why it is currently the #1 class. And that's the cards from 3 to 5 mana, where in other classes, you don't even want to touch those cards, or sorry, 4 to 5 real classes. Yeah. But the power level of the 3 to 5 mana cards in Paladin is so much higher than other classes. Underlight Angling Rod is one of the best weapons ever printed. It's a fiery war axe that gives you 2 cards. Already incredible. Then in addition, they have Goody 2 shields. A 3-mana 4/2 Divine Shield. Straight up +1/+1 on Scarlet Crusader. One of the best cards from Classic in most formats.
Yeah.
It also has cards that are so good in the mid game, even though they cost small amounts of mana, like Hand of Adal. A card that you are very happy on turn 4 to go Hand of Adal hero power in the worst case, or Hand of Adal draw 2-drop, play it as well. You have there's never a turn in Paladin right now where you are struggling to find something to do. You always have strong minions or strong spells that back up whatever your board situation looks like. On top of that, they have one of the most powerful removal suites we've ever seen from a Paladin class, besides Hand of oh no, what's the card? The 4-mana 3/4 that makes a minion a 3/3? Outside of that, Hand of
Oh, yeah, you're talking about shoot, no, I can't think of it, but I know what you're talking about.
I probably stole it from your brain, and now neither of us can think about it. But outside of that card, we've never seen Paladin have the quality of removal they have right now. Consecration Equality still exists, just as always. Consecration's never going away. But they also have their typical True Silver Champion, and the Underlight Angling Rod, and the Hammer of Narrow, and the most important card for Paladin, I think, right now, Libram of Justice. A card that it's a 5-mana spell that gives you a Light's Justice and makes your opponent's minions all killable by anything. They're X1s all of a sudden. It reduces their toughness to 1. So you're setting up situations in Paladin where when you have the board, you win because you can play Spike Ridge Steed or Hand of Adal on your minions, or Blessing of Authority, God forbid. Or you can win the board back from not having anything with Libram of Justice, or Equality, or any of the other ways they can shrink your minions right now. So Paladin is a uniquely powerful situation because it not only has the early late meta set up in its own class, it also has cards that are incredible in the mid game when other classes are missing that. I think that's why it's at that 53.2% win rate. So that's probably the only class where when I don't draft 4 or 5s, I never feel like I'm lacking something to do on those turns.
Yeah, I was looking at the list, and I'm just I'm amazed that Vine Cleaver has stood the test of time that much. I mean, obviously it's a strong weapon, but it's amazing that it's still that high up there.
Mm-hmm. So that's Paladin. Can we talk about Paladins? It's our last class, our final class of the day. Yes. Can we talk about Paladin's greatest weakness, or at least in most metas, Paladin's greatest weakness, the 5th best class right now at a solid 50.3% win rate, Rogue. Why does the dagger once again rule the roost?
I love that tie-in. That's so good. I mean, Rogue is just Rogue. Finally, I almost wonder if with micro adjustments and stuff, something changed, because I'm seeing saps and some cards I haven't seen for a while, like back in the meta again. But they do some of the things that this meta needs, which is all their cards generate value. They generate tons of cards just, with all the stuff that they have. They remove things really efficiently. They're able to, play a 3-drop on turn 5 and just dagger and use that, and that's a strong enough turn for them. So they're able to just sustain so much, and they just eventually overtake you, with face damage. I think the only thing difficult now with Rogue is trying to manage your health. It's a little difficult right now, because you definitely that'd be something that I'd say that's difficult, more difficult than normal right now, is managing your health.
So I wanted to ask you about that, because with Rogue, it seems like when I lose with Rogue, it's because I'm attacking my opponent's minions and clearing them up. And then I look down at the life totals, and I honestly, I play on mobile a lot, so my hand hides my life total. So I'll look down and I'll suddenly like minimize my hand and look at it, and I'll be like, oh my God, I'm at 12. How did this happen? And I realize that I've been using my mana really efficiently, but my opponent has a Proto Drake in play, and I'm at 12, and I'm not sure how I'm going to come back from that. What kind of cards does Rogue have that can actually save you in that situation, and why are those? That's it.
Save me from what? Say what situation? From when you have
like a situation where you have 6 cards left in your hand, your opponent has 2, but they just on turn 8 play a Proto Drake, and you're at 12 because you've been so good at using your hero power.
Well, I mean, they have there's the cards like clowns and stuff. There's a lot of taunts you can draft. And a lot of times in that situation, with cold bloods and different things that can go face, there's also the 5. My brain's not thinking of the right card. It's a 5-mana 4/4 that gives cold blood to something. It's back in the meta. I love that card. But anyway, there's a lot of cards that just help you push face damage. I'm seeing eviscerates a lot again too. But yeah, you just you're able to just basically ignore the Proto Drake and just kind of go for face, and you're able to apply enough pressure with. There's actually, you end up drafting a decent amount of weapons. There's the what's the death rattle weapon called?
Necrium Blade.
Yep, Necrium Blade's been super good. I've been drafting like the 6-mana 2/2 that summons the 7/7, the Dragling mech. What is that thing called?
We should probably know card names a little better.
I know. Well, there's just so many. I actually have realized we're getting to a point that there's so many cards. It's hard to remember. I know what their stats are and what they do, but remembering all of them is tough.
It's difficult.
But I mean, just like many of the classes, I draft Rogue a lot differently than even some of the top players I watch. I don't really draft on 2-drops. I typically draft lots of ones that are powerful. They have the 1-mana 3/1 stealth and stuff like that. And then I draft really, really good 3-drops. I dagger on 2, and then I just outvalue people.
So I think Vile Fiend Imprisoned Vile Fiend is still a card I value very highly in Rogue. Not only because it's a 2-mana 3/5, which is just generically good, but also because it combines really well with the Rogue hero power to kill. There's quite a few 4/4s right now in the format, that just kind of show up. They're not the ideal cards that you want in your deck, but a lot of people's turn 4 is a 4/4. And if they're playing so having that extra ping, having the Vile Fiend that deals the 3 lives, and then your hero power can finish it off is really great.
Yeah, and it's interesting. The 10th best class, or the 10th best card here in the meta for Rogue that we looked up was Crystallizer, and it just shows how important 1-mana cards are for 1-mana minions are for Rogue. So with their hero power, you can, there's just, again, it's the same thing with I really feel like the spell power push is really helped a lot of these classes out. All the classes that are top right now, Shaman, Druid, Rogue, they all benefit from really good, with Phantom Knives or whatever, they really benefit from spell power. And there's just a lot of ways to generate it with 5-mana 4/4 that discovers, there's just so many. So
I think there is one thing that hsreplay can't account for, and that's discover minions that are good, because it gives you discover minions are cards that give you an additional choice, and the better you are at Hearthstone, the more effective having extra choices is, right?
Right.
So while Steward of Scrolls is not listed on any of these classes in their top 10 most highest win rates, I think it's a card that everyone drafts. And that means, because if you see a Steward of Scrolls, is there a card you take over it? Not often, right? There's a few times, but rarely. So I believe that when you take Steward of Scrolls, you are more likely to win with it if you are a better player than if you are not, but everyone takes it. So the win rate of Steward of Scrolls is going to go down because of that.
True.
While and I think that's underselling its actual importance to the meta. Like you said, spell power is really important, and rogue is a class that particularly benefits from that, much like Shaman, where if you get a Maelstrom Portal or a Fan of Knives, you're having a much bigger effect on the board than you would have otherwise. So again, another neutral minion that's strong. It's a 5-drop, but it's not really a 5-drop. It's if you play a Steward of Scrolls on 5, it's not because you want the card to be your play for the turn. It's because you want to set up a play for a later turn.
And typically, like we talked about, how there's a lot of weak play around that turn. A lot of times, it's not really that bad on the board. It should be. It should be terrible on the board. But a lot of times it's like, well, they got a 5/4. I'm just going to play this. It trades into it. That's good enough for me. I get to discover and set up my later turns. And, because the meta really is a lot about swings. Last week you ranted about the card generation. I have noticed that you actually can some of the cards that I didn't care about, like the prize vendor, the card that draws up one for your opponent and yourself. Like, I do care a little bit more about. I used to not care about those as much because it seemed like they would generate so many cards. There wasn't really a way to stop it. Now it seems like with some of the other sets they've introduced, you do actually have a chance to like actually outskill people with using your cards effectively, which is nice. So
basically, in conclusion, I think that what our belief about the meta is it's an early late meta, and as a result, there's going to be a lot of swing turns. Those middle turns 4 through 7 are going to be all about who can swing the board back and forth using their early game cards, and then dominate the board with a big 8 or 9 mana card, or a big 8 or 9 mana turn where you use a Mage Scribe or a Steward plus whatever they generate to gain a huge amount of card advantage. So you use those early game cards to get tempo advantage, and then use the late game cards to win the game through card advantage or through dominance through a large minion. Do you got anything else for us, Cal?
No, I think that about covers it. Like I said, hopefully that'll help you guys with navigating the meta, or at least give you some ideas on how to improve on some of the classes that we went through. So that's going to do it for episode 2 of the Kelcast. You can join us live here on Twitch, 8 p.m. Eastern every week on Saturday, or you can download the podcast wherever you get your podcast. Every Monday, we'll have it uploaded for you guys there. You can also find me on Twitch, where I stream daily, 7 a.m. Eastern, Monday through Saturday. Or you can search me you can search Keludar on YouTube or Twitter. That's Keludar. I also will have the YouTube. On YouTube, I'm going to put up the video version of the podcast, most likely every Sunday. It'll be up, and sometimes it might even be up at latest, Saturday. But make sure to tune in next week when we're going to talk about cards and decks we love and why they're so effective. We're also going to be bringing on Judge. He's going to be joining us as well, so that'll be fun. And also a thank you to John Laux for the music used in the episode. You can find links to all of our contributors in the show notes. This has been the Kelcast. See you next week.
Okay, Kel. Are we done? We got anything left?
No, that's it.
Okay, then I need to get something the frick off my chest, man. I'm winning with Hunter, and everyone thinks I'm wrong, but I think it's good, okay? I think Hunter's fine. I think it's totally fine. And I don't want to... No, wait, you said okay? No one says okay. Everyone says I'm wrong, man. They think I'm wrong. They think Hunter's bad, but no. Did you know that it has a hero power that deals 2 damage directly to the face? Because I think Hunter's actually pretty good, and I have 2 strategies for you. I know it's not one of the top 5 classes. I know it has a less than a 45% win rate, but I just want you to know that there are multiple ways to draft Hunter, and they are good. There's Synergy Hunter, number 1. You go Pack Tactics / whatever other secrets you want to get, and then you go Petting Zoo. You live in a freaking petting zoo, Keludar, and you make 3/3s every day. 3/3s over and over and over again. What's your opponent supposed to do about that? Cast Hellfire? No, because Warlock's a crappy class and no one plays that one. So what are they supposed to do? They got nothing. You're going to go hunter after hunter after hunter hero power, and your opponent's going to die. There's another strategy. You go with tempo. If you and your opponent are fighting for the board and you're just continuously playing one decent card after another, but you started with the Wolpertinger, guess what? They're behind by a Wolpertinger. And then your hero power, that's going to kill them. That's what I'm saying. I know I'm wrong, but I'm not admitting it because I think Hunter is incredible right now. I've had 2 runs in a row, 12 wins. 12 wins. Guess what I did? I hit that hero power button. One hero power after another. I know it's not good. Okay.
You know what? I know this is not the way it was scheduled, but you know what? I have something I got to get off my chest.
Oh.
Because I thought you were going to talk about this, but now you're forcing me to talk about it, which is Demon Hunter also is pretty good right now. Oh. I've been killing it with Demon Hunter. Now, thankfully, we've been having some other arena players that have been backing me up on this. And I know people like Judge that are coming on next week are struggling with it, but we'll teach him. We'll make him. We'll make him see. Because here's the thing that's crazy is I'm not even getting a lot of Demon Hunter class cards, but the overpowered ones. But I'm still really doing well with it. I think it has to do with the fact that there's silence and there's a couple other just certain mechanics that just work really well, lifesteal even, and I've just been killing with it. I think my win rate is at least close to 8, if not over, with Demon Hunter.
So here's what we're saying: are we united in saying that any class that includes Hunter is ready to hunt down these other classes and take them down?
They're going to get on top. We're calling it now. We're going to get them on top. That's right.
Mm-hmm. Early, late. I just want to hit that hero power late. That's what I'm saying. Kellen out. I'm done.
Okay. We'll see you guys next week.